All right, in a newly unsealed court filing from special counsel Robert Mueller's office, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn says that people connected to the Trump administration and to Capitol Hill contacted him to influence his cooperation with the Russia investigation. The filing says, quote, the defendant informed the government of multiple instances, both before and after his guilty plea, where either he or his attorneys received communications from persons connected to the administration or Congress that could have affected both his willingness to cooperate and the completeness of that cooperation. The filing says Flynn even provided a voicemail recording, which a federal judge ordered to be released in transcript form by May 31st. The judge also ruled to release a transcript of what Flynn said in his call with the Russian ambassador in late 2016 after the Obama administration leveled sanctions. And the judge further ordered that all the parts of the special counsel's report related to Flynn be unredacted and made public within the next 2 weeks. Let's bring in NBC News intelligence and national security reporter Ken Dilanian. Ken, good to have you. Tell us what the significance of all this is.
Good morning, Mika. Well, there's a number of takeaways. One is that part of this Flynn document had been released first in December, and you remember there was great fanfare attached to it, and then it landed and it was almost entirely redacted. It was sort of like Al Capone's vault. And at that time, there was great anticipation about what exactly was in this. Well, now we know some of what's in it. And when you read it, it's just another example of how you look at this document and say, okay, so there were efforts to influence the testimony of a key witness in the Mueller investigation. Why was no one charged with obstruction of justice? It's just yet another piece of evidence when you have hundreds of former prosecutors saying if Donald Trump wasn't the president, he may well have been charged with obstruction.
So Ken, can nobody bring, I mean, when this comes to light, it sounds like it just may be witness tampering, obstruction of justice. Could somebody bring charges against the two parties that are revealed here if it is obviously obstruction of justice?
They certainly could, Joe. Another prosecutor could take a look at this. But the fact that the special counsel already investigated and knows far more than we do based on this filing and declined to file charges against anyone else feels like it argues against that happening. And we've seen a number of instances in this case, and it raises, again, a host of questions that maybe only Robert Mueller can answer if he comes to testify before Congress. The other takeaway is that with the judge ordering the disclosure of things that were redacted, it just shows that this Justice Department hard and fast position that we can't release these certain things that were grand jury information or other information, that can fall by the wayside almost immediately when a judge decides that it's going to come out. And we're going to see more of this because Congress has subpoenaed the full report, and that's eventually going to go before a judge. The federal courts have the ultimate say, not William Barr and the Justice Department, about what we're going to see in this report.
So, Ken, it's been, what, a couple months since the letter came out, since we learned that the Mueller report was completed and sent on to the Justice Department. Are you hearing any reporting as to why Robert Mueller didn't put a subpoena on the president and have him testify like Ken Starr did with Bill Clinton, or I think he did? Or why he didn't subpoena Don Jr. when there were questions of whether Don Jr. had lied to Congress, or why, in this case, there was obvious witness tampering, obvious obstruction of justice. They cited 10 instances of possible obstruction of justice. Any idea why? I mean, are you hearing anything all these weeks later as to why Mueller didn't step over that threshold?
I've heard explanations, Joe. They're not particularly satisfying until we hear from Robert Mueller himself. I mean, the explanation on why he didn't subpoena the president, Trump's legal team put this out early on, and others have said this, Justice Department officials, that he just felt like that would delay the investigation extraordinarily, and the American public needed answers, and they couldn't afford a year-long court fight and a constitutional battle, which ultimately could end with the president taking the Fifth Amendment anyway, and he couldn't get his testimony. And he felt like he had enough, because normally you don't get the defendant's state of mind by talking to the defendant. You talk to the people who spoke to the defendant. You look at documents. He felt like he had enough on that score. But you're right, Joe. I mean, it's unsatisfying. We need some answers here, and almost every move Democrats have made to try to get some answers in front of the American public has backfired, and so they're now sort of relying on, can they get Robert Mueller to testify? And there's negotiations about that right now, but so far he has not agreed to do so. He's still a Justice Department employee, and that can place more restrictions on his ability to come to Congress.
So, Ken, looking at the court papers in your new reporting this morning about Michael Flynn, it says persons connected to the administration or Congress reached out to Michael Flynn or his attorneys. Do we have any sense of who that is, who left that voicemail in November of 2017? If it was a personal attorney, I know Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow have said it wasn't them. Who from Congress would have been reaching out on behalf of the administration to try to interfere with cooperation between Michael Flynn and the special counsel?
I can think of some suspects, Joe, but that's a big question right now. We don't have that reporting. In terms of which lawyer it was, the Washington Post and others are reporting that it was John Dowd. And after all, it's a small group of people, and Giuliani and Sekulow, as you said, have denied doing that. And, you know, this voicemail was actually excerpted in the Mueller report. It didn't get a lot of attention at the time. And the Mueller report goes on to say that this lawyer essentially threatened Flynn when it became clear that Flynn had flipped, and communicated to Flynn's attorneys that he was going to tell the president, and the president wasn't going to be very happy. And that was another example cited in the Mueller report of what looked like an attempt to influence the testimony of a key witness, Willie.
All right, wow. NBC's Ken Dilanian, thank you very much for being on this Friday morning. And still ahead on Morning Joe, Alabama isn't exactly a toss-up state, but what's happening there could have a big impact on politics nationwide.
You know what, actually, though, if you think about it, it could help Doug Jones again.
We'll see.
Especially if Roy Moore
More women
is
have
thinking
come
about
up to me out of the blue to talk about what's going on there. There's new backlash to that state's abortion law, and some of the criticism is coming from conservatives. We'll run through that just ahead.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.